so today we're back with another deep dive, and today we're actually going to be looking into a Pokemon called Noctowl. Was that weird that I did it from way out there? So Noctowl is a normal and flying type Pokemon, maxing out at level 40 with 15s across the board. We do hit that 2024 up here. Now with a 1 on attack, 14 defense, and 15 stamina at level 28.5, we do hit that 1499, which is great for the Great League there. Now according to my spreadsheet and all the numbers that I have ran, Noctowl should be right around 11th in bulk and 7th in stat product, which is just perfect. That's so good. And of course, all of that does come from our base stats here. A 145 on attack, 156 on defense, and a 225 on stamina. Not too shabby. Now, when it comes to our moves here, we do have several different options. And out of these moves, there are some interesting sets that we can kind of do. And we'll kind of go over a few of them, and then it seems like every freaking deep dive now I make a spreadsheet comparing some moves, but whatever, we're going to get into it. So we do have Wing Attack and Extrasensory on our fast moves here. Wing Attack, of course, being a stab move, does kind of give it a little bit of an edge. 3.5 energy per turn for 2.5 damage per turn. Not too bad. After stab, it does get bumped up to the 3. Extrasensory here for 3 1/3 energy per turn for 2.67. We are not psychic type, so just ignore that. For some reason, I did that again today. So I did actually run some numbers with Extrasensory versus Wing Attack. I don't have a spreadsheet for it. I'll just basically tell you Wing Attack is superior. It actually ends up winning more matchups. Even though it does like falter in the Asian area, it does do a tad bit more damage, but it doesn't actually help us out too much, so therefore Wing Attack definitely does make more sense here. Now in the charge move area, this is a little different. So we do have Psychic here for 70 energy, we get 100 damage at a 1.43. We have Sky Attack for 45 energy, we get 80 damage at a 1.78. We do get Stab here, so it's a 96 on the damage for a 2.13. Then we do have Nightshade for 55 energy, we get 60 damage at a 1.09. And out of those three moves, Sky Attack definitely is the most enticing here. It's the cheapest to fire, and it's a stab candidate, so it definitely does help us out a lot on our damage there. So Sky Attack is a just amazing all-around move here. I definitely think that's the move that you want to go with at minimum for Noctowl. Then it comes down to, do you want Psychic or Nightshade? So like I said, made a spreadsheet. So as usual, if you want to take a look at this spreadsheet for yourself, I will drop it down in the comments below. Considering that this video is going up almost almost 15 hours after I'm recording, I may forget like right at the time that this video goes live, but I promise I will post it shortly after. Hopefully within an hour. Hopefully I don't forget. I'll set her. Okay, Google. Remind me to post a comment on the Noctowl deep dive tomorrow at 12 p.m. Sweet. In this spreadsheet, just like usual, we have our meta Pokemon here on the left. You can see we have Beedrill, Breloom, Credilli, all the way down. All the top 22 meta Pokemon that PvPoke designates for us there. We do have Nightshade in our first column and Psychic in our second column. And in our last column, we do have the results there, which basically it's just like every other spreadsheet I've made up until this point. If the numbers match, it's the same result. If one number is higher than the other, whether we win or lose that matchup, I'm just trying to figure out which move is better more often than the other, okay? So in this scenario, like let's look at the Alolan Graveler here. So we have a 290 for Nightshade and a 223 for Psychic. So Nightshade, even though those moves both lose in the scenario up against Alolan Graveler, we still do better with Nightshade. So if by random chance the Alolan Graveler is already kind of weak and you possibly have that chance to win, I'd much rather have Nightshade than Psychic in that matchup. So if we look at Lantern here, which Lantern is our only example because it's our only one that does this, but Lantern actually has Nightshade at a 255 where Psychic actually has 326. So Psychic's actually better up against the Lantern, but that's the only matchup that Psychic is actually better in. And if you look down here at the bottom, you can see the results tab, which does have a 3 under Nightshade, which actually means that Nightshade is just flat out more preferred than Psychic 3 times out of the 4 times that there's a variance. Psychic is only preferred that one time up against Lantern, but you do see that Nightshade actually is better in not only the Alolan Graveler like we talked about, but the Magnezone and the Cantonian Raichu. Nightshade takes it in the meta. If we actually switch, which there's another sheet, if you look at the spreadsheet for yourself, there's a whole nother sheet for the entire Jungle Cup. You can actually see every single Pokemon inside of the Jungle Cup here, and we're gonna kind of skip through most of these here. We're just gonna look at the big numbers down here at the bottom. So even here again, you can see Nightshade is actually preferred 8 times out of the entire Jungle Cup, compared to Psychic only being preferred 5 times out of the entire cup. So Nightshade definitely seems to be the better option here. It will inch us out in a couple of more matchups in the meta picks. Not that it's going to change us from a losing to a winning scenario, but it will inch us out a little bit better in terms of battle rating. Plus, in the entire cup, it actually does help us in 8 matches versus the 5 that the Psychic is actually better in. So for the purpose of this video, we're going to go with Wing Attack, Sky Attack, and Nightshade. So now let's actually go over our shielding situations for Noctowl here. In our 0 versus 0, we actually have a 73.1%, which is pretty freaking gnarly. Then we also have in our 2 versus 0, where I have 2 shields, my opponent doesn't have any shields, we actually have a 94% here. And those actually aren't the ones that I'm super concerned about. I'd rather know which ones actually still end up beating us if I have complete shield advantage rather than them having complete shield advantage. And that 6% mainly consists of the Rock Boys being Graveler, Golem, and even Geodude, I'm pretty sure showed up here. And then we have Pachirisu, Minun, and Flaffy. Okay, that's kind of odd, but basically those 3 electric types plus the 3 rock boys are kind of giving us some problems. Don't get confused, Credilli and Lily did not show up there at all, just Alolan, Graveler, Geodude, and Golem there. Our next shield scenario is the 0 versus 2, which is where I have 0 shields, but my opponent actually has 2 shields this time. We actually end up winning 11.2, so we are in the double digits there, which is always good. And actually, these are the ones that I'm more concerned about. If I have complete shield disadvantage this time, I want to know which Pokemon I can still end up beating when they have 2 full shields. And a lot of the Pokemon that show up here are a ton of the bugs. Not all of them, but a ton of them do show up here. Plus, there's a couple of grass types. I think it was Turtwig, Oddish, and then the more relevant ones that I wrote down are maybe Jumpluff and Sceptile. You possibly could see those, but mainly if it's got a weakness to the flying type, that's more than likely going to show up here, with a couple of exceptions, of course. But generally, most bugs, Jumpluff, Sceptile, are probably going to be the ones that that show up the most in an actual tournament. Last but not least, we do have the 2 versus 2, which is where I have both shields. My opponent actually has both shields. We actually end up winning 70.1% here. So that actually ends up telling me that we do prefer to close. We statistically will win more matchups in a closing scenario rather than an opening scenario. If we have both shields, my opponent has both shields, versus my opponent having no shields and myself having no shields, we do better in the latter scenario there. So now let's actually move on into some matchups here. You can see we do have PV Pokey. We actually have Wing Attack, Sky Attack, Nightshade on our Noctowl there with 1 shield for us. We are going to do a custom multi-group here with 1 shield for them. We are just going to quick fill it with the Jungle Cup meta. Once we hit battle here, we can actually see we have 13 wins, 8 losses, and a draw. So let's actually see here. We do have wins up against Vespiquen, Ivysaur, Heracross, Breloom, Masquerain, Victory Bell, Venusaur, Venomoth, Scizor, Scyther, Fortress, Beedrill, Credilli, and then we do hit that tie up against ourselves, which of course is okay. Then we do move on into our losses here with Pidgeot, Vigoroth, Graveler, Magneton, Magnezone, Lantern, Golem, and then we do have our Raichu down at the very bottom there. So some interesting picks, but of course most of those make sense. I mean, if it's going to be remotely weak to our flying type damage, then it's pretty much a win for us. If it's not, and possibly even has some super effective damage for us, then it kind of gives us some problems. Now, Pidgeot and Vigoroth, of course, are kind of some outliers there because Pidgeot can actually end up beating the Noctowl. That's kind of what gives Pidgeot a place in the meta, which we've already talked about Pidgeot in another deep dive, so if you want to go check that out, go do that. But Vigoroth, of course, being the king of the jungle here, there's not a whole lot you could do up against him other than just literally run a direct counter. Now in our last section here, we're actually gonna be changing the name. So I thought maybe coverage makes a little bit more of an appropriate name for this section. It used to be called the countering section, but I mean, it's not really like talking that much about countering. It was intended to, but generally it's more about like coverage here. So we actually covered the bug type, the grass type, and the normal type fairly well, whereas we have some really bad coverage up against the electric types. The way that I always try to convey this section is basically these are the things you want to focus on whenever you use your Noctowl, whereas these are the things you want to avoid or even think about putting them on your team if you're worried about Noctowl appearing a lot in your local region. Let's actually go over the bug types here first. As you can see, we have 0 losses and 0 ties, which what does that mean? We win all of them. So if we actually look here, you can see all of these bugs here do end up falling. The hardest possible matchups are going to be Yen, Mega Fortress, and V-Drill, but still we end up winning all 3 of those. So not too shabby up against the bug types. That's a very, very strong start. Next, we do have the grass types here, which the grass types here again, 0 losses, 0 ties, which what does that mean? We end up beating every single one of them. As you can see, the hardest matchups for us here are going to be the Credilli, the Snover, and the Lilip, which that's kind of awkward, but I guess that makes a little bit of sense. We're going to see the Credilli and the Snover both pushing a little bit of either rock damage or ice damage respectively. Lilip also going to pick up a little bit of that rock damage. So the grass types aren't actually that big of a problem whatsoever, which is very, very strong for Noctowl here. Now in our last typing that we actually do really well up against, we do have the normal types here, 7 losses and 5 ties, which out of the sheer amount of normal type Pokemon there are, that's pretty heavy. So if we go down and we look here, we do have our 7 losses being Alolan Raticate being the worst possible matchup for us. Vigoroth, King of the Jungle, making some sense there. Delcatty, Linoon, Pidgeot, Furret, Castform. And then you see we do start to tie up against the Wigglytuff. Porygon makes an appearance here. We make an appearance of ourselves, Noctowl of course. Munchlax and Miltank also making an appearance in the ties. But outside of those, actually very few normal types out of the vast amount of normal types that there are. We're doing really good up against the normals, which is very, very impressive. Now, as far as the typing that we do horrible up against, the electric typing, we have 0 wins and 0 ties, and I guess if we're gonna be super dominating in 3 out of the 4 typings, this other typing better just hit us hard, and it does in this scenario. You can see we don't have a single win here. Manectric actually being the closest matchup that we would have, but Luxio and Alolan Raichu rounding out the top 3 easier matchups, even though we're still gonna lose those. And then you can see we do lose the Magneton, the Plusle, and the Raichu. You know what? Plusle and Minun have really been showing up lately, and I kind of want to look into that. I want to see if it would be kind of cheeky just to run them. But anyways, so as you can see, those are our 3 worst possible matchups, and that makes a little bit of sense. And I think this is kind of where the electric type starts to show its value inside of the Jungle Cup, because with these freaking numbers, these are huge numbers right here. I mean, 2 entire typings in a 1 versus 1 shield scenario. 2 entire typings we have no problem with. That's insane. So I think Noctowl has to get this like grade A stamp from me. Like, I definitely think that he is worth running. He's worth the investment in the actual Jungle Cup. If you for some reason don't want to run the Noctowl or don't like to run him, I definitely think that Pidgeot is second best, considering we do win up against the Noctowl, but we do have a tad bit worse numbers than our actual subject today. But the electric typing really starts to shine here, because I think Noctowl or Pidgeot, or at least a normal flying type Pokemon, will be on almost every team this month. I think a lot of people are going to need that coverage for 2 of these typings, and the electric typing, even though that's probably going to be a wild card pick, I definitely think it's a very safe wild card pick to go with a strong electric type here. Now, of course, there are the Alolan Graveler and, you know, that kind of thing, which are not only electric type, but extremely rock type and good in their own right. But at least have some form of an electric tack on your team. I definitely think that it's worth it because of these flying types that are actually in the cup. So that is actually going to be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for watching, of course. Like I said, I definitely feel like Noctowl gets the stamp of approval. He puts up some really high numbers. Really impressed with it. it's he's going to be extremely powerful if he's used correctly. I definitely think that he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. I'd almost consider him, if Vigoroth is the king of the jungle, I definitely think that Noctowl is Zazu. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The Lion King's not a really good reference here. But either way, I definitely think that Noctowl is going to be huge. I think that a lot of people are going to be using Noctowl, or they're going to be using a Pidgeot in return, whichever way. I definitely think that some coverage for the Noctowl would definitely be a smart idea at this point. So with that being it for today, guys, thank you so much for hanging out. As always, if you do have a deep dive idea, make sure you drop it down in the comments below. This is what we do have coming up next. And of course, whatever you guys vote does get added to this spreadsheet, and it goes into the pie. It makes a nice little chart here, and it works. So yeah. Other than that, I don't think there's anything else. I'm still working on ideas. As I was doing this deep dive, like as I was, writing everything on the boards, I thought, why don't I just paint the entire wall green? If I painted the entire wall green, then holy cow, that would be really cool. I'd just have one giant green screen, right? But there's a problem, because the green screen would interfere with my hat, it would interfere with my clothes. I usually like cut out the green screen so that it doesn't do that. That's why sometimes you see it like interfere with my shirt. I don't know if it'll do it this time, but whatever. I don't know, it's kind of iffy. I don't know if I really want to do that. I may. I don't know yet, okay? But anyways, thank you guys for hanging out. Thank you so much for watching. Always remember that if you like to like videos, you can do that, but if you don't, you can be that guy. Otherwise, all I have to say down in the comments below, and until our next video, I will catch you then.